All right,
Hey.
record. I believe we're recording. All right, so welcome along to Lunchtime Learning. I'm Jeremy from Design Factory New Zealand. Lunchtime Learning is a fantastic little gathering we've been doing for about 3 years now, where effectively we get interesting people coming along to talk about interesting things. And today we have the interesting Christina McKenzie. So I'll let Christina talk a little bit more about who she is and what she does. She works for the Instillery and she's pretty well known, definitely around the Waikato and around New Zealand, I think in IT and kind of solution circles, which is great. And Christina's been along and actually done a Lunchtime Learning before and been to a few Design Factory events, but really wanted to hear more about what she's been up to in her journey. So I have had a sneak preview of this talk, which is great. And so without any further ado, I will throw over to you, Christina. So if you want to share your screen, my video will disappear and then I'll let you take over.
Perfect. Can you see that okay, Jeremy?
Yeah, I can see that. That's fine.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and kia ora everybody. Thank you for joining the talk today. It's very kind of you all to give up 30 minutes of your lunch hour to come and listen, and I really appreciate it. Before I begin, I want to extend a nod to the Design Factory in Hamilton, especially the team, Jeremy, Margie, and the rest of the crew there. You guys do a wonderful job and play such a pivotal role in supporting innovation in our community with the people and the companies that you work with. So thank you so much for inviting me back and continuing to keep up these events during lockdown and what is certainly a strange time in our world today. So when Jeremy asked me to come back and have a talk a few months ago, I immediately said yes, and then I immediately went quiet, just trying to think about something to talk about that might deem listen worthy, and that proved to be a challenge. Jeremy said, just choose something that you've learned or something that you've read lately, and I thought, yeah, sure, Jeremy. No one wants to hear about edge computing. So, but after some shower contemplation and bathroom contemplation, and don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about, it came to me. I'll talk about the horrible, wonderful, unexpected, and at times uncomfortable journey I've been on since I last spoke here, which is the world of business development, also known as sales. So this is a talk a little bit on vulnerability. So in the interest of exposing oneself to judgment or harm, I will share a little bit about me first. So I'm the youngest of 7 children. I grew up in a very loving, busy, competitive and fun home. I effectively had 5 mums and my sisters and a big brother who was kind enough to let me hang out with him when it all got a bit much. I'm a mum myself. I actually became a mum when I was just turned 18. I now have 2 beautiful sons who are 13 and 7. In 2007, I was studying communications and behavioural psychology at the University of Waikato, raising my eldest boy when I was offered an opportunity to move to Auckland and join the communications team of a major bank. I guess armed with a strong desire to provide a future for my family, of course, but to be honest, probably even stronger to prove to myself and everyone else that I was more than just a teen mum, I decided to continue to study full-time, work full-time and raise my son with the help of my parents. Needless to say, during these years, I was not the sanest human you would ever meet. This went on for a period before eventually earning a few stripes at the bank. I was offered an analyst role in a niche project-based area of the bank. The opportunity was offered as a remote position, so it also allowed me to move back to Hamilton. And in Hamilton and in the Waikato is where I've built a really strong network and I guess group of great individuals to work with, which I'm very proud of. However, it's in this role that I was introduced to IT and the impact that technology was having on the way we work and interact with each other. Classed as the project chick, I was tasked with rolling out several IT-based projects into the business, automating human interaction and creating new ways of working, as they say. At the time, my colleagues and I did not have one single technology-based project going as planned. We're talking millions over budget and years over time. And talking to the technical people I worked with was like speaking in a different language. I don't think I'm overstating it when I tell you we begrudgingly worked together. But the thing is, I'm also annoyingly curious and optimistic about the human race. And so I guess I was determined to learn more about these weird creatures called developers and project managers and the like. And I decided it was time to leave the safety of my bank job and join a small software development company called Enlightened Designs in Hamilton. It's here where I got hooked on the digital revolution and the limitless opportunities it can bring. Starting at the bottom, I gave myself a year to learn the ropes and be promoted. Within 10 months, I was on the leadership team, and within 18 months, I was creating new services and businesses and managing an awesome bunch of people, and with the help of some really talented crew. As product manager, I reported to the CEO at 26, and then made a pivot into sales, which has seen me continue into roles with Amazon Web Services, one of the world's largest companies, and now working with, in my opinion, what is the best Kiwi tech brand in the market today, The Instillery, a digital services company based in both Waikato and Auckland that is never satisfied with the status quo and goes out of its way to support and enable New Zealand businesses and our epic Kiwi talent. So I guess 2 or 3 years ago now, I did one of these talks, and I did it on user-centered design and product management as a discipline. And at the time when I did this talk, I had led some great teams, as I mentioned, and we'd built out some successful products and services together in the market. The key to success in this role, however, was not only designing offerings that customers would actually buy, it was going out and telling the customers about them, also known as selling it, go figure. But by far, the single biggest challenge I faced in this role was convincing the sales team to do just that. To me, at the time, it seemed like the excuses from the sales team were endless. Despite more investment than ever before in the company's 20-year history in product development and marketing and customer demand being high, there was never enough marketing material. The sales pitches and training documents were always missing some crucial data that the rep would surely be publicly crucified on if they just tested it. The sales team didn't trust that the company could actually deliver. They weren't confident in telling the story. The list went on, and it changed every week. After some time and many painstaking discussions, customer pre-sales visits, and a few hard-earned wins, we started to get there. But if I'm honest with you, the process left me bruised. I was completely convinced that salespeople were yesterday's news, didn't get it, and it really was all long lunches and golf. Feeling disheartened at how hard the process was, I wanted to make it easier going forward. I chatted about this with my boss, Damon Kelly, at the time, and we came up with a solution that helped solve a few problems for everyone. I would take over our top accounts and enter into a business development role for a year or so to learn, and to finally complete a goal of mine, which was to have completed every business function and worked in every line of business in the company. So why did I do this? As soon as I made this change, I had almost immediate regret. I went from having teams of wonderfully talented people at my disposal, budgets, and a trusted position within the company, to overnight being suspected as a money-hungry, commission-hunting, buzzword-slinging creature of the shadows. And that might be a tad bit overdramatic for effect, but it's actually not too far off. And I can completely understand why. You're looking at images on the screen here of, I guess, what we've been trained to believe salespeople are, and why would anybody want to work with people like that? I myself don't like shopping in stores for fear of being approached by pushy sales reps telling me that I look good in miniskirts that were designed for my 19-year-old niece. And I can assure you, I surely do not look good in those miniskirts. But in my first few months of sales, and after what was probably the 100th meltdown, someone in the business gave me some sage words. Christina, in sales, you can be the queen of the customer world, subject to schizophrenia by your executives and dog-turd to your delivery teams. But don't give up, you won't forgive yourself. Just do it your way and make it your own. And I'm so glad I did. Whilst it was tough going at the start, I've learned more about those I work with, myself, and about the true importance of humility, vulnerability, and leadership at work than in any other role or business function I've been in to date. So what do I mean when I say humility, and what does it look like? I've purposely chosen an ironic slide here with the queen of, I guess, what we don't consider to be humility. But for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to define it a little bit differently. When I posted on Facebook and LinkedIn that I was doing this talk, my sister and some colleagues said to me, "Names, you're doing a talk on humility, you." And look, I get it. Salespeople, and I count myself amongst that group, are not known for their modesty or meekness. And personally, I think that's fine to a point. For salespeople are the hunters of a tribe, and a certain amount of ego is needed to do that day in and day out, year after year. But for the purposes of this story, I define humility in this way. Humble people brag about others' success, not just their own. They are self-aware and they are situationally aware. Humility is not about thinking less of yourself, but it's about thinking of yourself less. Humility respects that everyone has a point, whether you agree with it or not. It seeks to understand, listen, and communicate from a place of good intent. In sales, it also builds trust. So we've known for quite some time that the internet has leveled the playing field with customers. So why is humility important? So Now more than ever, our customers know more, if not as much, if not more, about the product or service you are selling than you do. For me, I'm not technical by trade, so it was never going to be possible for me to impress a customer by telling them how much more I knew about technology than they did. Listening, understanding, being honest when you don't know what you don't know establishes trust, credibility, and dependability. Humility in sales has to do with your internal customer. So I'm shocked at how many salespeople treat their clients and prospects with the utmost of consideration, and yet inside their own organization, they are rude and treat their own company with arrogance and disdain. Should you start to do that in sales, you can give it a go. You won't end up in prison, but you'll quickly work out that your time there is short-linked. Your mistakes that you will surely make will be broadcasted on the world stage rather than be forgiven and forgotten. And I think what we need to understand, particularly in a services organization, is that your destinies are linked. You need each other, and as the saying goes, a lone wolf starves. So here's my bottom line on humility. No one is the center of the universe. No one. Yes, you're an important player, but you're not the only important player. No one is. Collaboration, connectedness, empathy, these tools are key to innovation. Working with others are critical to the process, and you're dependent on them for your success. Treat these people well, like they were your customer, because that's what they are, your internal customer. Now, vulnerability. I don't know about all of you, but when I read this definition, it sounds like a bloody awful idea. Why on earth would you willingly expose yourself to being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally? In fact, you're actually trained not to. Psychologically, we do everything we can, our brains and our bodies do everything we can to not expose ourselves to danger and to keep us safe. So vulnerability is in fact counterintuitive AF. As humans, yet the concept of vulnerability has become a bit of a buzzword in recent times. I'm sure you've all heard about Brené Brown and her work on shame and vulnerability, and the TLDR version of that is as follows. Vulnerability is not a weakness. In fact, it is courageous. To be vulnerable is to admit you don't know everything, to speak your honest truth, and to be seen. And here is something for absolute certain. When we are vulnerable, we will get hurt, rejected, and betrayed. But if you can stay the course, you will also be seen, valued, and experience life on a level that somehow feels more connected to others. And for me, helps me feel a sense of freedom that I enjoy and is important to me. I guess in sales, why vulnerability is important is because central to successful customer relationships is trust. We've talked about this before. It's not unusual for reps and their customers to spend months, if not years, on opportunities with a customer. And there's a lot riding on it. Both parties have to trust each other to get to a successful outcome. And so how do we establish trust quickly? Through vulnerability. And you can't fake it. When we put ourselves in an uncomfortable position, we make it safe for others to step into that zone with us, building trust as we do. So build trust as we do based on how we respond to them while they're in that scenario. So what does it look like? Asking the questions you want to know, speaking with your mind and being honest about what you don't know. In a conversation with a new customer, the vulnerability will almost always be found painfully in two parts. When I ask for what I want or need, and the silence that occasionally follows. It's also not knowing the answers and asking for help from your team. And by doing this simple act, we invite collaboration from others. And what I noticed is we got better outcomes for everyone. And what's more, everyone involved had higher engagement and excitement about their role in the deal. However, vulnerability is a double-edged sword, and I do want to talk about something else that I learned, which is potentially not as positive. Unfortunately, whilst attitudes towards vulnerability are changing, studies from various psychological journals have shown that if you're not a Caucasian middle-aged male, showing vulnerability is more likely to be attributed to weakness and incompetence than strength and leadership. And this has certainly felt true to me over the years. And I think it's a real pity. It's a missed opportunity to cultivate the style of leadership and interactions we want. A simple action that can be taken is for each of us to look at ourselves and how we discuss and communicate with those around us, and really look for how we judge those. If you are liking what I'm saying and you believe that vulnerability has a shot, I encourage you to look for the brave ones around you, the crazy ones, the ones who know their weaknesses and their strengths and put themselves out there. Watch them, think about what it is that you like about them, and train your brain to see honesty, openness, and vulnerability as a strength, and learn to respect it. And if you want to give vulnerability a go and you're scared, I just encourage you to give it time. It takes practice, but you will get there. So what has this all got to do with leadership anyway? This is a bit of an embarrassing story, but I will share it with you. When I was 19, I decided that when I grew up, I was going to be a CEO. Of what? It didn't really matter. I had a naive preoccupation with being a CEO and a total boss. I saw it as total freedom, being able to have an epic platform of influence to impact change and wear some wicked pencil skirts at the same time. Now, all of this makes me cringe now, to be honest. I've since learned that the CEO gig is more about being of total service to others and in a constant state of scrutiny than the glam that I imagined. However, I don't regret that I had the goal. Because I had this goal, I decided early on in my career that in order to be the best CEO I could be, I needed to understand every role. Like Dr. Seuss says here, the more you learn, the more places you go, the more you read, the more things you will know. And I think what that says to me is by doing and by experiencing, you are able to actually shift the roles and the pathways that you take in life rather than just experience it from the sidelines. But one of the fears I had when I pivoted from an exec position to sales was being seen as less than. That I was no longer a people manager or a leader, I wouldn't have the status that I needed or that I wanted to affect the change that I wanted to see. However, here's the thing: a leader can be anyone. They have traits. Rather than roles. In a book called Good to Great that I recommend anyone reads, the author discusses the concept of level 5 leadership. It is this form of leadership that the book argues that some of the most successful companies of all time have in common in their people, and it is shown in all levels of their organisation. The same traits of those who practice humility and vulnerability can be found in those who demonstrate level 5 leadership. My CEO and friend, Mike Jenkins, writes about his version of leadership like this. Leaders are followed because of their personality, behaviour, and beliefs. Leaders take a great deal of interest in the genuine success of their followers. In turn, leaders inspire others to do their best work through shared vision, commitment, belief, and dedication. In sales, what I've found have been my most successful bids is when all parties rally around a shared vision and demonstrate equal commitment, belief, and dedication to achieving that vision or goal. As soon as I understood that leadership is a mindset and not a role, the limitations I put on myself were lifted. Again, the biggest wins I've ever had is when we've been able to work with the customer to truly influence a step change in their business, to do something ambitious and different. In this role, over the last few years, I've led teams that have created platforms that enable community workers in South Auckland to see 4 times as many families in a week through technology than without. I've led campaigns that have resulted in Kiwi companies delivering new products across the world. These campaigns and projects at times have been quick and others have taken years, but one thing is for sure, they have all gotten hard. People are tested and change is difficult. It takes humility, vulnerability, and leadership to see that through. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. If I am live, there we go. Hey, thanks so much, Christina. Quick question. I'm a reader, and so you obviously had lots of quotes in there, and was just wondering what books you found particularly helpful. I'm particularly interested in the vulnerability, so it might be around that. But if there's any other books that you thought were really kind of seminal on your journey?
Yeah, I'd say a great book would be Culture Code. Yeah, Culture Code for sure. Like I mentioned, Good to Great. That's a fantastic book if you're interested in leadership. I haven't actually read Brené Brown's books, but I've listened to, I watched her Netflix documentary, which I thought was quite cool and probably confirmation bias, to be honest. Yeah, so I'd say those books are really good. Have to think of a few more for you, send them through.
No, that's all right. And maybe last question. So moving forward, I mean, here's an interesting one. How have those 3 learning journeys you've been on, how have they served you well during this lockdown time? Perhaps where, perhaps leadership or engagement has been more remote or things like this. Has it been harder to practice this or has it been easier? What's been your experience?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I think I'm probably what people would describe as an empath. So during lockdown, I really felt for everyone else around me, including myself, but it was definitely hard. And I know that the leaders in our organisation are fantastic, and it was tough to lead through some of that with the pressures that were on. So, how those lessons helped me was being able to empathise with the situation that we were all in. Often mediate where required, be able to address things, and I guess for me, humility, and I don't always get it right, but it's about adjusting my communication style and my delivery style to the audience that I'm working with, people that I'm working with. But also, it's not just about that. It's also about being clear on the outcome you're trying to achieve, and at times choosing communication styles that work to get that outcome, even if they might seem counterintuitive. I also think as soon as I was able to see, some days it was really shit, and I just admitted it. That's really tough. Meeting from meeting, and with the kids at home, and having to be a teacher, which, by the way, I'm not good at, and all that type of stuff. I think everyone was going through the same thing. So just talking about it was really, really helpful. I'm really lucky. I work with a great team at the Instillery, so we were able to sort of maintain velocity without too much of an impact during lockdown.
Cool. Yeah, I guess I'm struck by what you've said. A lot of it sounds like it's learning to become a good human. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these things, when we look at it, we go, hey, this is fantastic how sales has taken you on this journey to perhaps embrace more fully, your humanity in a good way.
Yeah, I think for me it was sort of, these things weren't new, but they were tested in sales because something happened. And what I noticed was, as soon as I had the sales hat on, the way people treated me was different. And doors didn't just open, and people just didn't do stuff. And so it made me realize how much for granted I took some of that stuff, and how much it wasn't actually me. So again, humility, like, I guess, taking me down a peg, but it wasn't actually me. It was the role that I was in. And so I had to learn different skills and really test different skills to get there. And it does sound like a good human, but I don't want to understate the lessons I learned around, and it have been well documented, around the unfairness. Not all virtues are valued equally. And I think for people that are not, middle-aged white men, they aren't treated with the same respect when they come up and expose themselves to vulnerability, or say things like, I don't know, or I'm having a bad day. It's often said things like, you're emotional, or you're this, or you're that. And those words are really unhelpful. And so what do we do? You just got to push on, right? But it's unfortunately for most people, I think they're very afraid to do these things. And I still find today, you still want to just blame a person, or get to the simplest outcome, but the best outcome is kind of always taking that path of least resistance and trying to understand it a bit deeper.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for articulating that journey so well, and I think kind of moving from both your experiences in a way that for all of us, we can kind of have little hooks onto, and kind of connect to. So really appreciate your time today, Christina, so thank you so much for that.
No worries. Thanks heaps, Jeremy.
All right, catch you around.
See ya.